History that we learned had nothing to do with what went on in the black community.
Made it all black. None of the white stations would put up fences like this to children growing up here had all that they needed to thrive.
Community raised kids.
Events and people and places in the rich history of Halls Hill. When I was a student at Langston, all the staff was black. Everything during that time in Arlington County was segregated. There were no integrated schools, so all of the staff at Langston was black. And it wasn't until I went to Stratford that was an integrated situation in 1959.
This location has always been the site of where black children were educated when this was a segregated community. Initially, right around here was the Sumner School, which opened in the early 1900s. It was a two-room school, one classroom, a very, very small office. At about 1920, it became clear that that was not sufficient for the number of kids. So there was a foundation called the Rosenwald Foundation, which was started by a man by the name of Julius Rosenwald, who started Sears. He had a foundation, and that foundation funded schools for Negroes in the southern states because southern states were not funding schools for Negroes. But a part of the stipulation for getting that funding was that the Negro community had to raise funds and the government locality had to contribute. So the Rosenwald Foundation, Arlington County, and then the Halls Hill community came together to get the money, and the community decided that they wanted to name the school in recognition of John M. Langston, who was the Inspector General of the Freedmen's Bureau, which was the federal government agency that was developed to support the formerly enslaved people after Emancipation Proclamation. He was also one of the founders of Howard University Law School, and he was the first black congressman from the state of Virginia. So he was very well respected, and that's why so much in this neighborhood is named after him. So that school opened in 1925.
This was the neighborhood school for all of the kids that lived in Halls Hill. And it was here until 1966. And our whole life evolved around this school. It was one of the largest facilities in the community that we had access to. So it was a school, it was a rec center in the evening. A lot of the people that lived here were employed at the school in all capacities. Some of our teachers lived right in the neighborhood. So they were teachers at the school, and I remember I had one first grade teacher who was also my Sunday school teacher. The custodian at the school at the time that I was going here was a trustee at the church. So it was really a community school. And everything that was big that went on in the community, special events, happened here at the school.
My whole family went to Langston. I'm the only person in my entire immediate family who did not graduate, who did not get promoted from Langston. I ended up going to an integrated school at second grade. So I knew pretty much everybody at the school. My mother was one of the lunch ladies at the school. So everybody in the neighborhood knew everybody. This was the kind of neighborhood where the teachers would come to your home for dinner. This was the kind of place where people were close, and the neighborhood, the teachers, everything was kind of all together, in that we kind of felt like we were one.
Growing up in Langston, it was a very strict environment in terms of rules and regulations, and it was because they wanted the best for us, and they wanted to make sure that we had what we needed to be able to successfully navigate out here in the world with all the injustices that we had.
One of the things that is really important, especially for those of us who went to school here, was the annual May Day. celebration that was held where there was a big pole and you had ribbons around it and everybody wore white, and we played field games that we had practiced, and our parents came and watched us, and it was just a really, really beautiful experience that went on from like 1930 to 1966.
May Day was probably the biggest event that happened because it was the end of the year program. And it always happened outside, and it was out in this area, in the back of the school. The tradition was to wrap the maypole, and each class had to perform, and it was the end of school.
All the black children went to the black schools. So, for example, there was a black doctor by the name of Harold Johnson who lived in the 2900 block of Lexington Street, which is about probably a half a mile from here, but it's in the middle of the white community. Only because he was a doctor and had lots of money was he even able to purchase that house, but he could not send his children to the white school in his neighborhood. So it didn't matter how much money you had. It didn't matter whether you were a professional who could afford to live in the white community. There weren't a lot of them, but they couldn't send their kids to the white school.
Well, in 1966, Langston closed, and the children in this community who were used to being together as a school population, and everything revolved around that day, were dispersed at different schools. So they weren't all together like they had used to be. They went to schools where they may or may not have been recognized. They may or may not have been welcomed. And that's a really difficult time in a child's life when you're talking about elementary school. It's your formative years.
One of the things that many people don't realize about the historically black schools here in Arlington is that our teachers were, college educated. Many of them had graduate degrees. And so these schools were, critical in kind of giving black kids who, in major media on the TV and things were made to think that, we weren't capable. We knew we were capable. And so when the time came to do integration at the elementary school level, county decided to do it here in North Arlington first. As I don't know whether you're aware, but the county wasn't fully integrated until 1971, until Drew Elementary School in Green Valley was integrated. But unlike Drew, where they allowed white people to come to the black school, they wouldn't do that here at Langston. So rather than allowing the white children who lived close to this neighborhood, like across the highway and that kind of thing, to come to this neighborhood school, they closed the school. And they divided the black children who went to this elementary school into 5 different elementary schools. It would make sense to send them maybe to the 2 closest, but they wouldn't do that because that would mean that the black children comprised more than 35% of the student body. And they didn't want black people to have a majority or even close to a majority because they were afraid that white parents wouldn't send their children. So the black children were bused to 4 different schools, and the school that was closest, where they were to walk at Woodlawn, they had to fight to get that egress. It just seemed extremely unfair, and it really changed our neighborhood, not for the better. It was just another slap in the face to the black community because the school was in good shape. It had just had an addition a couple of years before, but they didn't feel that our community was deserving to have a neighborhood school, and it was really a blow.
So not all the people in the community were happy about that. And the kids didn't all have good experiences. Our parents, for the most part, were for the integration of schools because they thought that we would have more resources and opportunities. But at the same time, we struggled with other injustices when we got to the schools because you weren't necessarily wanted there. You were there because the law said you could go there.
The mural behind us was painted by an artist by the name of Roderick Turner. It is a revision of a previous mural that was put here almost 30 years ago.
It was originally done as a community project with the county and the summer youth program here at Langston. And about 3 years ago, the snowplow from McDonald's inadvertently knocked part of it down.
In working with the Lee Highway Alliance, the John M. Langston Citizens Association, and the McDonald's Corporation, we were able to have the original artists come out and redo the mural, which is something that makes our community very happy. We're very pleased about it.
So to me, I'm honored just to be at the service of the community. Originally, I did this mural 25 years ago. I didn't realize the depth of its significance.
This mural depicts events and people and places in the rich history of Halls Hill.
This is the Zappa Girls. That was a teen young lady program that was started and managed by Sandra Green, who used to run this rec center for Arlington County Recreation. This boy here, Langston had a basketball team called the Stags. So that was during the era of the Negro Recreation, when it's called the Negro Recreation section. From 1948 until like 60 something, Arlington County had segregated recreation, and Langston Stag was a segregated recreation basketball team. The next is the Turkey Bowl. Every Thanksgiving, we have a turkey bowl on our Highview Park playground, and it's what we call the old heads versus the young heads. And it happens about 11 o'clock on Thanksgiving morning, and it's been going on for years and years. Last year was the first time it didn't happen because of COVID, but people from all over the area who used to live in this neighborhood, or who used to hang out in this neighborhood, or who married somebody from this neighborhood, hundreds of people come back on Dinwiddie and Cameron streets, and we see each other and we watch the football game. And so that depicts that. This over here is John M. Langston in front of the original John M. Langston building that was built in 1925. And then the last is the Halls Hill Volunteer Fire Department, now known as Fire Station 8, which is the first African-American staffed fire station below the Mason-Dixon line that got started in 1918. So we just celebrated their 100th anniversary a couple of years ago.
My murals tell stories, and they usually reflect the history of the neighborhood. For this one, it was important because the history needs to continue on. The wall is not just for some, it's for everybody. The more everybody understands and the more everybody comes together, then we're more that unit and really draw the best out of a community.
It's right beside the parking lot and right beside the tennis courts. That way people can know exactly where it is when they come here. But come by and see it, it's beautiful.